some of you were on we set up a video conferencing with Chris from his home in New Hampshire a while ago, and you know that just about any facet of a subject matter pertaining to spacefaring peoples, their history of their presence on Earth, the intensification of their presence now, purpose, and so forth. He has anecdotal stories about, some of them involve actual experience, that he's had contact with remarkable men, to borrow a phrase from Gurdjieff. He's looked deeply into some of the science of the technology. He's had contact with spiritual masters who have deep awareness of, seem to have deep awareness of what's going on. Just pulls together from all kinds of sources, as well as his association with some of the key members of the John Mack Institute, as Doug has pointed out in the past. So I think there's three big do you mind if I go into a couple?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I think there's three big concepts that would help you with an understanding of what he's going to get into. The first is that there is a cosmological understanding. Chris has presented this in a previous webinar that we held, but it is a vision of the universe as not being a material universe. It is a universe whose origin lies in that which is unmanifest. And that which is unmanifest through emerges into manifestation through a series of stages. And in the framework in which he has studied this, these are called lokas, or spheres or worlds or dimensional realms of reality. In the highest one, there's just pure being, let us say. This is consciousness that is unmanifest. And from that it goes into a state in which there is awareness of self. There is the feeling, I exist. I exist. These all have technical names. And then from that dimensional sphere where there's just very subtle morphing of consciousness into a state in which there is self-awareness, there's self-reflection, there's a sense of existence. I am. The God feels I am. I exist. From there it goes to a feeling of I do. I have the potential to act. I have creative potentiality. The third stepping down is a dimensional level that is the realm of potentiation. So once there is the sense, the cosmic sense, of potentiality to create, then there comes the potentiation of creation. All exists there in potential. Some of you have heard of the term the Akashic Record. This is what the Akashic Record is. Those who go into the Akashic Record, they can read the past, they can read the future, because it is all here and now. And this is key. It is here now. So there is a here-ness, a sense of space, and there is a now-ness, a sense of time. But those are not yet set up in a linear fashion. They're not distinguished in the sense of a kind of a continuity. Time does not have a past and a future. It is all present. And space does not have an up and a down and a sideways. It is all here. So it is all existing, all this potentiality in the here and now, not yet manifest. Then when it drops down into the next loka, the next dimensional realm, it is the realm of cosmic imagination. From potentiation, there begins to become the imagining of expression, of the expressed universe. And then it drops down from there into the material manifestation. Now, the reason this is significant is that our understanding of the technologies of aliens and their nature, among many, is so confined to thinking within a paradigm in which only the material manifestation, only the material universe is real. Those who have studied shamanism, practice shamanism, of course, they are journeying into this other realm. It is called Swarloka. The most common term you will hear is astral planes, or astral realm. Those who've read Autobiography of a Yogi, they know that Yogananda's master went to this Paranloka world within this subtle sphere. Those who are around subtle beings that don't seem to have material existence but show up in mythologies and show up in people's psilocybin visions. All of these have an existence in a more subtle realm. And many kinds of dream states and dream experiences go on in these realms. And those whose psyches are more advanced. Imagine the human race within another million or so years of evolution, of psychic development. We already see what those cultures who have explored these realms have explored with their shamanic practices and so forth. There's much to suggest that more advanced spacefaring peoples, many of them have significant capacity to move in this subtler realm. In this subtler realm, there is distinction of space and time. There is linearity. But just as when you're in a dream state, you know how time is very fluid, space is very fluid, so it is in this loka, this dimensional realm, the astral realm. So that if you can, if you have a subtle technology and you can move up into this realm, then it is possible to travel in different ways and then drop back into the material space, just for example. So that is one big concept. And our science needs to recognize that the material world is situated, is nested within deeper dimensional realms. A second thing concerns what Chris has called microbiota. It is also roughly called prana or chi, or Yogananda called it life trons. There's a diversity of names for, this is essentially quanta of life force, either the animating substance of our material expression, but also the media of mind. It exists at a couple of levels, 3 actually. The spiritual energy you feel when you're around a great spiritual being like, Amachi, a great guru, that is an emanation as well of a very subtle form of this substance. And this forms in a condition in which material substance is under extreme pressure, primarily in the core stellar bodies and planetary bodies. There has been a crudification of pure consciousness through a series of steps, dropping down until it reaches materiality, very crude. And then that compression of consciousness, if you will, reaches its most extreme nadir in the core planetary bodies and stellar bodies. And there is no more room for it to become denser, cruder. And there is also this desire for it to, like a spring that you condense, to seek to expand back and return to its original nature. The resultant of that tension is the release of these. Matter is sort of pulverized in a way that releases these subtle particles, these light particles. And under proper conditions, these catalyze the formation of organic materials or exist in association with organic molecules and begin to build up living structures and build up mind and the evolution of mind. and the continuing subtlification of mind, until you get to a point where some 4.5 billion years later on this planet, you have sentient minds like ours that are capable of self-reflection. And this process continues on. And there are races that have evolved far beyond ours. And sentience is not limited to what has been achieved on this planet. And in fact, some of these races, their capacities of mind are remarkable. They have, with mind, they can exert influence over the material world in significant ways. And to come up, as Chris may share with you, and from his experience, to come up in the presence of some of these minds, the impact, the psychic impact on one's own mind may be significant. So, microbiota, life substance, it has three basic forms. That which animates our physical bodies, the prana, as it's commonly called, or chi, those who work with qigong, or healing energy. The psychic microbiota, which is the media of mind. Our mind, just like a computer, has media, which is the flow of electrons. In the same way, our minds have a media that it expresses through, which is a subtle form. And then the most subtle is the spiritual microbiota. So that is that provides the energetic component of this evolution of life from the crude material manifestation back toward source. And a third concept is, let me bring that I will call neo-humanism. There is substantive indication, both from our own collective human experience and from that which is being shared by many sentient races that are having subtle contact with human beings, that there is a need for a deep shift on this planet. And at the core of this shift is a need for a shift of consciousness, more precisely a shift of values. And at the essence of that is a shift toward a recognition that all life is interdependent, all life is interwoven. There is a wholeness of being that we are a part of. And to start making distinctions based on race, on gender, on caste, on class, on so many of these things is a fundamental fallacy. And not only that, but in the end, it leads to dead endings. We cannot go on down this pathway of having these associations of separateness. We have to think of ourselves in a universalist way. And that needs to become the value base out of which arises a new social vision, a new social order. And if that is your value base, you do not have a social vision that is based on extreme competition, on greed, on the privileging of the individual at the expense of communities and other life forms and so forth. You have then the potentiality to conceptualize how society would work in a way that breeds cooperation, that strives for the success of all, that strives for eliciting the full potentialities, not just of individuals in their individual expression, but collectives in their expression, while maintaining a harmony with the rest of life on the planet. So, I want to say this by way of introduction. I hope it supports.
Yeah. So now, thank you.
Wait. Prashanta, you want to mic him up? Can you mic him up here?
About 100 different subjects here.
Huh?
Is this on?
I have no idea.
It doesn't sound like it.
Can you hear me?
No, it's not meant to mic his voice, it's meant to record it.
Yes, you're fine.
It's all fine? Okay.
It's for the camera here.
So, I came here wanting to rant and rave on the materialism of and the economic control of all our media and what we're taught to believe, and how this is warping just about everything we understand. And is anybody interested in that?
Yes. Is there anybody that isn't aware of it?
Just news anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just give an example. The New York Times, this was a couple of weeks ago, they ran a story that there was columns of Russian tanks and armored personnel carriers going towards the Ukrainian border. And the UN said, okay, well, we better send a team up to verify this. Of course, they got there was nothing there. And does anybody complain? Does anybody say, well, the New York Times just lied? I haven't heard anything. Has anybody heard anything? Everything we hear on the major media is basically a lie. And there's nothing we can do about it. And we are in a controlled psychic environment that's being formulated to make us believe a certain scenario of reality. And it's essentially an extreme materialism. And this materialism, and the reason they teach us this materialism is they want to justify their ownership of all the wealth and their control of all the wealth. And one of the greatest threats to that control is any knowledge that we as human beings have some greater evolution other than watching TV and playing sports. They are desperate to keep us from expanding our mind. And our guru said, Ravi and I have a guru named Prabhat Sangha Ranjan Sarkar, Pierre Sarkar. He talked about this force of evolution coming from the growth of microbiota into small animals, back into higher animals, and then into human beings, that this evolutionary force is the most powerful force in the universe. And what happens when that force gets blocked? There is an explosion. And that explosion happens either as revolution on a social level, and if that can't happen, then it occurs as natural disasters. So change is happening, change is a must, and it's going to happen soon, and it'll probably happen on all levels. And hopefully out of that, we'll be able to regain a sense of reality and just throw off this oppression. It is oppression. Pierre Sarkar called about it's capitalism. Capitalism not in terms of, if you want to trade or sell something and make money, you make a little profit. That's not capitalism. That's business. If you want to, all the systems of the economy, if they're done merely to help us survive or help us get ahead, that's not capitalism. As soon as you try to manage the economy to make it better for everybody, that's not capitalism. Capitalism is a winner-takes-all system, pure materialist system. It's like a monopoly game. That's capitalism. And this whole illusion of the 1%, there can never be more than 1% major owners in a capitalist system, because they won't allow it. So to break that down, we have to overcome these dogmas. The capitalists themselves put out this idea that, well, if you're not a capitalist, you must be a communist, right? Who started communism? The capitalists. They funded Marx. They funded Marx too. They funded Marx. They funded Trotsky. They funded Lenin.
Hitler.
They funded. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I haven't read about that, so I don't know. But I have read about the trainloads of money going with the Bolsheviks in Russia. So you might wonder, well, why did they fund them? And who knows? There's several good reasons they might have done it. But in any case, they're both highly centralized economic systems that inevitably result in control of the population on all levels. You know, communism is blatant, it's overt, everybody knows they're being oppressed, and everybody doesn't know what to do about it except revolt. Unfortunately, their system collapsed. But in capitalism, they don't know they're being oppressed. It's insidious. They do it by manipulation of the media on all levels. They do it by manipulation of government. The government is controlled by those people who have money. It's not a democracy. It's a capitalist dictatorship. Anyway, sorry for being too angry here.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Where does the idea of government and, you know, control over a mass of beings, where does that correlate with dominion, physical dominion? You know, what, you know, the glue that holds it all together, that allows us to move physically, and the idea that some one person can control us all from anywhere.
I'm not
With
sure.
that army behind him fighting.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Basically I'm saying, I mean, the physical part, how we are allowed to move around, and then society, these are two separate subjects, it feels like to me. You know, I don't believe that the president can control me from Washington DC.
No, I don't.
But somehow this one man is allowed to control everyone.
Well, my own personal opinion is the president doesn't have much power whatsoever. He's basically told what to do. But that's
How
not.
about if you finish it up and then we ask?
Yeah, let me ask a question. Anyhow, I think this insidious oppression, what it does is it closes your mind off to reality on a multi-level universe. It stops you from questioning, and when you do question, you're called crazy. You're called maybe a conspiracy nut, maybe it's called a UFO fanatic, you know, whatever. And the amazing thing is that they can block you from any scientific progress, and at the same time, they're funding the same progress secretly in the military. So it's a really, really bad situation. I'm quite sure that, yeah.
So what is the core of all this manipulation? I mean, this evil.
I mean, who's the core?
Where does this evil come from?
I don't know. You know, people say, oh, well, it's an extraterrestrial race, it's this, what do they call it, the,
Lizards?
lizards is one of them. The archons is another one. They say, well, the lizard people are just controlled by the archons, and the archons are some race that's doing this psychically. But, you know, to me, it really doesn't matter, because the solution is the same. You know, the solution, we don't have to know what the actual source is. We just have to know that the economic system we have facilitates the control, and we just have to change that. But I don't know where the source of evil is. I think, you know, if you look at the human body, we all have negative emotions, greed, anger, jealousy, you know, all these negative emotions, and if they're left to run rampant, they always end up in disastrous situations. If we allow greed to take over our economic system, we're all going to suffer for it. And
So a
answer-
higher entity just let his greed take over?
The higher meaning a human being?
No, I mean something on a higher level that's doing this.
I don't think a higher level person is doing it. I think they're...
On a higher dimensional level, higher psychic level, higher spiritual level.
Well, you know, I mean, I've heard about all this, and I have trouble understanding why a psychic being would want to control physical wealth, because they have no access to it. I can understand a physical being wanting to control physical wealth, And they are using their emotions are out of control or out of balance. And I can understand, negative maybe psychic entities attaching to them and trying to encourage them. But the actual evil, I think, just comes from regular old human beings who are just out of control.
Please continue with your talk.
Yeah. And so, let's see, where was I?
Capitalism.
Yeah. So this change has to happen. But I think it's also affecting our interrelationship with extraterrestrial races. I believe that they would like very much to invite us into their community. I think most of them, I'm not saying all of them, but most of them are harmless. They don't have any evil intentions. If I might, I have to say that Pierre Sarkar, from stories I've heard, had many interactions with different races. And one of the stories says that they, let's see, where did I get it? I have to choose my stories. I'll take one of James's stories. James Gillen, you've seen him. He told me that he has had a lot of interactions with these people under the mountain. He said there's 3 races there. They all share this base, and it's just used as a transportation hub. It's not anything special. And he said he was given a tour of the base, if we were to believe him. And he asked them why they don't make themselves present publicly. And they said, well, we're very afraid of us. And he said, so they regard us as very violent species, very unpredictable, and that our intent as a race is not very good at the moment. And our intent, of course, as a public race is materialism. And they said they expect some shift coming, they told me. They said there's some shift coming, and after this shift, they hope that we will be sort of a reformed species, and they will be able to come out publicly, and they're looking forward to being in our society, interacting very easily.
Excuse me, you said after the shift, they're hoping there will be what kind?
More
Informed?
interaction, public
Okay.
conscious interaction. One of my contacts, I told it before, is I asked them, why haven't you landed publicly? And they said, because your society is going through a transformation, a very important transformation. And if we were to land publicly, you would become dependent upon this, and you would fail to make the transformation. He said, therefore, we will make contact on a personal basis, but not a public basis, until after this transformation. And you might ask, well, what is this transformation? Well, it's a transformation from a capitalist materialist society to a broadly psycho-spiritually oriented society.
That might take some time.
I can think of things that can make it go pretty fast. Yeah.
Will we be harmed when this shift comes? I mean, obviously, we will be harmed.
Possibly. Not by the beings, but by...
No, but by the forces that will make the shift happen.
As Pierre Sarkar said, if we have a choice. If we make the change ourselves, we control the outcome. If we fail to make the change, Mother Nature will make the change, and she's not so discriminating. Yeah.
Now you said that they're more willing to meet with people on a personal level
Yeah.
in comparison to more of a public level. Now, what would their reasoning be for meeting on a personal level?
Good question. I don't know. Hold on, Doug. It's, I mean, I thought about it a lot, and certainly they probably have reasons that we don't understand. Do they make psychic changes in our minds? They have that potential, I believe. Do they have the ability to alter our, say, give us more mental ability? There's many experiences that experience that. There's certainly a lot of them who are just doing it for scientific purposes. They're just curious. They want, I already told you about this friend in Long Island. Is anybody interested in that story?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
This is a guy who had an experience on the Long Island Expressway. And he did his regression with Bud Hopkins. So that's all recorded and everything, although it never made it in any of Bud's books. This guy was an electrical engineer. He was driving home, I think it was in November, in the evening around 7 o'clock, it was all dark. He pulled off on an exit ramp. It was a forested area. It was in central Long Island. And all of a sudden his car was bathed with brilliant white light. He didn't know what to do. He tried moving his steering wheel, nothing happened. He tried stepping on the gas and his wheels just spun. And he really didn't know what was happening. And then out of the brilliant white light he saw this door open and these little beings, maybe 3.5, 4 feet tall, started hopping. Like rabbits, except kind of strangely, through the light, and they came over to his window, and he got so afraid that he defecated in his pants. Tell the truth. And he said they came up, and he had rolled up his windows, right? So they came up, and somehow they got their fingers up under the windows, and he said they were super strong. They just broke the whole mechanism, and the door opened. And then they opened the door, and they pulled him out. And he said there was one of them on each arm, and he said they must have had some device on him, because if he struggled, he would get this sharp jolt of pain through his body. But if he went calmly, there was no pain. So they brought him out through the door, and he was in this, pretty high-tech ship of some. I can't remember everything that was inside the ship, but. And then they proceeded to put him through some tests. They had this doorway, he said. It was just a frame, a rectangular frame. You could walk around it and look at it, and it was just a frame standing in the middle of the room. And they said, okay, they had him take off his shoes and socks. And they said, okay, walk through the frame. So he walks through the frame, and all of a sudden he's standing on hot burning sand in the desert. And his feet are burning, and he's getting sweaty, and then they tell him to come out, so he comes back out, and he looks, and it's just a frame again. It's just like, there's nothing there. And then they said, okay, go in again. So he walks through the frame again. This time he's on snow. And it's really cold. And he suspected that they were taking some kind of data about his body, how his body reacted to the different temperatures and things. And then he came out. And then, I can't remember everything he told me, but one of the other tests was they
You talked to him?
Huh? Yeah, he told me this all personally. And it's also in Bud Hopkins. This is all information that came out from the hypnosis. In terms of his conscious memory, he only remembered up to the beings breaking down the window and opening the door, and then he blacked out. So everything else after that was from the regression from Bud Hopkins. Just 1 second, let me just finish. And then they had him walk over to a bench, and one of the beings sat down with him. 2 other beings came from the hallway, bringing another kind of extraterrestrial with them. They had him in some kind of a iron you know, some
Shackles.
handcuffs of some sort, I guess. And they brought him over, and they said, this criminal, he's murdered a whole lot of people. He's very bad. And so they gave him a gun. He said, you know, we want you to shoot him because we're supposed to bring him to a prison somewhere, and they're, you know, we don't think they're going to deal correctly with him. We think he should just be shot. So please shoot him for us. And he wouldn't do it. And they said, no, come on, just shoot him. It's okay. He's a murderer. And he wouldn't do it. And we gave him back the gun. And he was sure that this was a test to see, you know, what he thought about morality and all that. I think they did more tests, but he got too afraid and he bailed out of the hypnosis and couldn't continue. And then he, the next thing he knew, he woke up lying on the ground in the leaves, in the woods. And then they, right next to him was his underwear, and right next to that was all the feces had been completely cleaned from his underwear and put on a little piece of paper on the leaf. They were very ecological beings, very clean. And then two people came in from the road and they had flashlights, and they said, well, we saw this light in the woods, we thought it might have been a car. He said, well, yeah, I lost my car here. And so they went walking around and they found his car. The lights were really dim, the battery was almost dead. He had been taken at about 7, and this was like 11 at night. And his car had been wedged in between a whole bunch of trees from above. It had been dropped down. And he ended up calling the police. The police came and said, you know, how'd you get this car in here? How'd you do that? Yeah, we got a chainsaw and chainsaw out so the tow truck could. Anyway, the point being that this would have been a scientific, it seems to me, a scientific, socially curious race trying to figure out about us, who we are, and what we think. I had a friend, Basil. He had tons of experiences, and he was told, he asked, you know, because he was very concerned about evil ETs. He said, how evil are they? And he said, well, 5% are selfish. They're here for their own selfish purposes. 80% are here just for curiosity and scientific purposes only. They don't want to intercede, they don't want to intervene. They may contact someone individually, but it's just for curiosity and science purposes. And 15% are here to assist for whatever reasons. Mostly, he said for this pole shift, which they expect to be happening. These were the told days. He said, pole shift's happening. We're coming. We're here to help if you need it. And they said, if the pole shift, if we determine that the pole shift is going to be really severe, we can, on our ship, and Basil said it was about a mile in diameter, about 5 miles long. So we can hold 1 million people for 3 days. You know, house them, feed them, and that's our limit. And then we'll put them back down. And they expected the pole shift to be pretty quick.
Is it a rotational pole or shift or magnetic pole?
Both. Yeah,
I was going to, you kind of spoke in different words, answered what I was going to say to Ravi or the question, which is, it was so long ago, when she asked it, I just trying to remember, it's something to do with
Why they personally contact us.
well, there's a really good essay I continue to refer to. It's kind of wrapped into what your answer was by Woody Strieber 5 years ago on how disclosure is going to happen. And I mean, it's wrapped into what you're talking about and your own experiences as well. Some of us here, that there's the power of consciousness is just so far beyond where we are as a human race. It would take away all wonder from your mind. When you evolve to their level of consciousness, it would just, your level of fascination would just immediately be gone. It would disappear. It's such, if you can see what they were doing to this gentleman, they were experimenting with time, with space, showing them examples of what just to see how he's gonna react.
Yeah,
Just imagine what they could do, I mean, to any one of us. I mean, this is, it's not an easy thing.
I
to
think if
have.
they wished to harm us, they would have done it already.
Sure. Sure, but it's such a deep experience, and you can talk to that from very personal
Yeah,
levels about what happens during the encounter.
and I know that they block our memory because they don't want us to be afraid. And they're also afraid of our reaction when they, I mean, if they pick somebody up to test them scientifically, they don't want them, bashing their head in or anything, they want them subdued. Who's the fire in the sky guy?
Travis Walton.
Travis Walton. Yeah.
Travis Walton.
Travis Walton fought back and they had some serious fights with them. But,
Jim Sparks, too.
yeah, Sparks also, right?
Mm.
There's probably no need for that. But.
What about cattle mutilations?
Well, this is a question. I mean, who does Earth Files?
Linda Walton now.
Yeah, Liz Moldhouse, right. She's absolutely convinced that there these Greys from the Four Corners area who are doing all these genetic manipulations are doing the cattle mutilations. She said, oh, well, they're doing it for food, they're doing it for their own physical well-being and for their genetic experiments. But Basil's ET said, no, we're doing it. Basil's ET said there's several groups doing it for different reasons, but their group was doing it because they wanted to monitor our environment. They said our environment is seriously polluted. They're very worried that we're destroying our environment. So they said they take cows because they're ruminants and they're very constantly eating whatever's in the ground, which is very recent pollution. And the pollution shows up in mouth parts, genetic parts, and some organs, and you'll find that that's what they're taking. And they told Basil, we test these parts of the cow because this is where the effects of pollution will show first. And Basil complained and said, well, yeah, but you're killing cows. And I said, Basil, we kill a few cows a year, and you kill 1 million a day? Well, how the hell do we kill a day?
Now, what about the significance of crop circles?
Oh, that's right, crop circles. I don't know about crop. Let me get to crop circles. I'll just finish the crop mutilation. And another factor which goes against what Linda says is that often they'll just take one side of the jaw. And if you were raised trying to get something for food, you would make maximum utilization of it. Only a person who's sampling would only take half the jaw. But the crop circles, I don't know, Sumitra and I went to England, we saw 3 different crop circles. We went in one that had been formed the previous night.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was not visible, really, barely visible from the road. So obviously it couldn't have been made for public purposes. We walked up.
In New Hampshire?
No, this was in the one that was 1 day old. It was on the road from Avebury to the White Horse.
White Horse, okay. In Surrey?
I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember the town.
That's in something.
Yeah, there's 3 White Horses, but this is the White Horse over the ridge from Avebury. And on that road that goes between them, it was up on the side of the hill. And so we walked in, and I felt this really tingly sensation. It went all the way up, almost to my waist. When I was in the circle, when I was out, I didn't feel it. When I went in, I could feel it. It was like this bubbly, like my legs had soda water in them or something. And I talked to it. It was an English woman there, and I asked her about it, and she said, oh yeah, I says, I always go in these circles, and yeah, that's exactly what I feel all the time. She says, very common, especially the newer circles. Have you ever been in one, or did you leave England too early? But there's certainly a lot of fakes. But, yeah.
I have a personal experience I'd like to share.
Okay.
That was
Speak up
really-
a little bit.
I said I have a personal experience that I'd like to share that was really benevolent. It happened, in the 60s in Altamont, which is a place where it's also a portal, and they actually have a center there for people to come and
Which,
California?
Which one? California, okay.
California. Anyway, it was at the Altamont Rolling Stone concert, and we got there early in the day, and we were walking through. There were people that had spent the night there, and a lot of them had shared that they'd seen in the nighttime, they'd seen some ships hovering around, and they were, just like really psyched on what had just happened. But, I didn't really make much of it. So then, throughout the day, as more and more people, because the concert happened later, but we got there early in the day, more and more people came, I found myself a place to sit on top of this school bus that was just to the right of the stage. But throughout that day, there was this ship, this white object that just stayed in the sky constantly through the whole time I was there. And I kept getting senses that it was, but I didn't really tune into it that much. But if some of you know about Altamont, there was the Hells Angels were doing security there, and there was a lot of really intense, and fellow was killed. And while I was sitting up on top of the bus there, I was kind of in a meditative state, and I was feeling these waves of like fear just coming over and washing over me. And then I would feel this energy coming from the ship down into me, transmuting that energy, and then I would be sending it out as calmness and love. And so I kept feeling that throughout, for a few hours actually. I felt like I was this conduit for this energy coming from. And because it's those kinds of situations, you know, it happened, and then you I didn't really dwell on it. And then I left and was initiated into Ananda Marga and went to India, and came back to the States, and this Margi couple said, "We saw your picture in Rolling Stone meditating on this school bus." And it was until then that I remembered, oh right, I forgot I was doing that transmutation for this. And it's, to me, even sharing this story, it's still a reality to me. It was a very powerful knowing that I was in touch, and that I was part of this conduit to make this shift.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. There's another reason would be if you...
Oh, and I wasn't on drugs, by the way.
Yeah. Suppose you evolved on another planet in the human life, and they became an advanced spacefaring race, and they had that capacity to trace where your mind went in between lives, which is technology. They will come here, and you say you were born here, they will come here, and they may pick you up just to see if you need any help, check out your health, and then just in a sense, just to be helpful if they can.
Or they might have psychic contact with you.
Yeah, or they may have psychic contact with you, right. It doesn't have to be physical.
Does the psychic, the phenomenon of psychicism, whatever it is, that would run along with the Akashic records, correct? Because
no, Akashic records I think are much more subtle.
okay, but it's everything that's been able to see and experience and find out. All the knowledge there is to know is within that dimension.
It's in the Akashic record, in the
All knowledge.
potentiation.
What about abductions? What are the purpose?
Well, I mean, there's just so many different reasons. Like this guy in Long Island, I think from everything he said, it was just for scientific study. There are people who have been abducted and have actually been healed of diseases. There obviously is some kind of genetic programming going on, and there's multiple different hybrid beings that have been seen. I mean, Janice saw, remember Janice saw these hybrid children. She didn't know if they were hers, but she was, had to interact with them. And that's very common. Why are they creating a hybrid race? There's so many different possibilities.
Could you speak a little bit about the definition of a hybrid race?
Well, see, I haven't had any experience with that, so I don't know what other people have experienced. It's mostly women, and they're often shown, taken up again, and shown, we're told that these hybrid, they're shown hybrid children and told them that, well, these are your children. And they say, well, you know, please hug them or give them some love or something. That's common.
Didn't Baba say something about India, that there was a certain race that actually helped evolution on the planet? That
Could
was
be, yeah.
intermingling with primates?
Could be. Pierre Sarker said that the human race was initially created by an extraterrestrial race about 1 million years ago. And he gave the location of where we would find the bones of those first people. But I can't get a hold of the guy who knows. And then he said that there, through the years there was other races that interacted and interbred. For instance, Basil had an experience with a particular race that looked African, except that they had big heads and no hair. But everything, all the facial features, they looked very African. And he talked to one of the men, and they came up to him, and they were very curious. They said, tell us about the situation of the African people. Of course, Basil, I don't think he could have even found Africa on a map. He was like, he dropped out of high school in 10th grade. He didn't know much of it. And he said, I don't know. And they said, and then they said, well, what are you doing to help the people of Africa? And he said, I'm not doing anything. And he knew that they were giving him hints that he should be, we should be helping the people of Africa. We should be doing something for them. And so he felt that it was his feeling that this particular race had something to do with the creation of the African people. But, so maybe there's, and then there's the tall blondes from Lyra, and they supposedly interacted with Europeans, and so there may be interactions of different races or at different times. But Pierre Sarker said the original human race was started many years ago, and then he said that the race that created them had so genetically manipulated their own bodies that they died out of bad
Little guys, great ones.
And also, there's another thing we have to watch out for. Everybody says, "Oh, what's the Greys? The Greys are doing this." And there's, I've heard actually, there's probably 70 or more different races that we would call Greys that are distinct and separate and no connection with each other. It's just a body type.
In terms of how they look like, remember that book by Myers, the guy from, I think, Switzerland?
Yeah.
Was communicating with Sanjasa. She's the
Yeah,
blonde, tall woman. She looks like completely human,
Oh yeah.
very tall, and she will come with a little ship,
Yeah.
meet with him somewhere, and they will be exchanging
Right.
different
Yeah, the
artifacts.
Pleiadian people.
Yeah, and then she will say, "Oh, my father is in the mothership.
Right.
I don't know how
Right.
far there." And she would say, "He's 700 years old."
How credible is it?
I don't know. I look at his pictures and they say his pictures are real, but he says some really far out things that I just don't buy. He said, he says, well, they told him he was the most evolved human on the planet.
He said, they said.
This is Billy Meyer.
Billy Meyer, right?
Yeah.
Now, they might highly question,
Yeah, highly questionable.
highly.
And, you know, I'm even open to saying that he did have some contacts and did have pictures, but I don't believe everything he says. I don't know what to think. But I do believe that there are plebeians. I mean, it seems like there's a whole lot of evidence, a lot of experiences from different people. Yeah.
I've had just a couple of dreams in my life that were like prophetic dreams, and the things came true, and it kind of scared me, because I wondered if maybe if there's like a time slip and things are going to happen. One of the dreams was before 911, for instance.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
I wasn't exactly, I didn't exactly see what happened, but I saw the things that happened right after that were in my dream, like 10 days before. But I'm just wondering, how can dreams show something that's happening in the future? There must be a time slip.
because every event that happens in the physical plane started with an idea. And it starts probably somewhere up potentiation. Then it gets manifested into all the potentials in imagination, sort of like drawing board, right? So when you're going back, and when you're having a lucid dream, and you're seeing some disaster happen, that's not necessarily what's going to happen. It's just you're looking at one of the potentials being played out in the imagination. So a guy like Michael Scally, you've heard of him, right?
Right.
You know, I think he's very honest. He says exactly what he saw, and it's probably a lot of it's wrong because he saw it correctly, but it's not what happened here. So there might be, say, 10 different potentials shown at this level, and if you dream at that level, you see one of them, but only one's going to happen here. And a lot of that's dependent on all kinds of factors, the factors of how we change, factors of spiritual intervention,
And our perception of how we perceive things.
and how we perceive things. Yeah, and so it's very complicated. Because I've seen a lot of disaster dreams, and I've had some recently, and they're scary, but I don't know if they're going to happen. Last fall, I saw Chicago being blown up. There was multiple atomic bombs, and I said, I guess it might happen, but who knows? Very scary, because they're very real. It's almost, when you're there, you feel the ground, you feel the heat from the bombs, you feel all the feelings there, but it's still just here, it's not here. Yeah.
Just what you're talking, I've also had very, very, very many prophetic dreams where there were wars, atomic bombs. I can feel it being melted, the heat,
Yeah.
the light, the red sky, all of that. But sorry, I got off track. I was actually just going to ask, why is there, should there be someone intervening for us all?
Well, Basil was told this, and I also, P.R. Sarko said the same thing, was that this planet is a very unusual planet in that we have a very high amount of genetic diversity. It's very rare in the universe. And Basil was told basically they're going to do everything we can to preserve it, even if it means letting all humans die. Oh, yeah. Because you can always recreate humans, but you can't recreate the environment if it's destroyed. So they told Basil, and P.R. Sarko said the same thing to a monk that told him, was that they would prevent an all-out nuclear war. They'd stop it.
Mm-hmm.
We may not know that they stopped it, but they would stop it. Said they may allow a limited nuclear war, but not an all-out nuclear war. And there seems to be a lot of evidence from military people that most of the military is aware how they can manipulate even missiles and sequences and code sequences and all that stuff.
There were some demonstrations of their power, right? The military.
Yeah, right up in the upper Midwest, I think. They flew over some silos and scrambled the launch codes and did all kinds of stuff.
On which side?
Who's
Who
missing?
did the scrambling?
Well, that was such a ship, some kind of ship.
It happened a few times.
Few times.
In the 1960s in
And it was
Montana.
reported in the disclosure meetings in Washington.
The Disclosure Project witness was named Robert Salas. If you go to YouTube and search Disclosure Robert Salas, it'll be his testimony talking about, he was in command of the facility when this happened.
And they tried replicating the sequence that happened that day to see if they could recreate it with a computer, and they could never replicate the whole situation. There were all these missiles in this bank of missile silos all went offline at the same time.
Could I add an observation, please?
Yeah.
The other day, I know that there are certain technologies that our government and maybe anyone in the world can't duplicate just yet, as far as the UFOs go. I was watching one of them coming due south, perfect line. North is that way, yes, south is that way. Okay, no, south. Okay, one goes south, no chemtrail, it was dissolving, it was military aircraft, I could hear it really high. And then maybe 5 minutes later, one coming right back due north, parallel. I've noticed that they're coming from North Washington and whatever, and they're heading down, probably over the ocean, and then heading back up, and they're observing like that. Pretty sure that's what the aircraft that we're hearing the last few days. Those aren't.
Those wouldn't be UFOs if they made more like
exactly.
that.
Is it true that in your experience with Basil that there was some transfer of technology?
Yeah, I'm trying to, if I have time, I'm trying to compile the technology that they gave Basil. It's a lot of science that counteracts a lot of what's known today. For instance, they pretty much said quantum physics is pretty much baloney. But if you look into quantum physics, where its origin are, you realize that it's really tenuous. I remember a friend of mine. He met he had a house right near Bob Hopkins' house in Orleans, Cape Cod. And he used to walk on the beach, and one day he met a guy vacationing there from Yale. It turns out he was a Nobel laureate physical chemist from Yale. And I asked him about quantum mechanics. This guy's won a Nobel Prize. And he said, well, quantum physics is it's a house of cards. He said, one small little piece of data and the whole thing's going to fall. And I think we have to take it with a grain of salt, but there's certain ideas of quantum physics, implications, like there's no real physical matter, it's really force fields. At some level, there is a particle that is, in a sense, just a force field. And then there are other force fields and particles. And of course, Pierre Sartre brings out the point that matter is a combination of consciousness and energy. This is different than quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics says it's all energy, and that there's this infinite potential in the point of space. Well, that's not necessarily true. If you have a particle, it's a piece of consciousness that's bound by energy. So the energy is the bottle, consciousness is what's being bound. And that's different than quantum mechanics. Let me finish, okay. And so they basically I'll tell you a few things. They said that there's many, many smaller particles than what the physicists are working with now. They talked about, they said the smallest particles that they work with, there may be a billion of them in an electron. They're very, very small, and they call big thing in physics now is, the quarks and the God particle at that level. And they said, they told Basil, well, the quarks are intermediate particles of no consequence. He said, don't even waste your time with them. And so it's a whole different scale, much smaller scale than what. And what keeps us from looking at that is this idea that you can't observe something so small, because your mind affects the experiment. And what they told Basil, that's baloney. You just have to figure out how to do it. Says you just haven't figured out how to do it yet.
But also the principle, Heisenberg principle of uncertainty, it's not
garbage.
real.
Yeah, that's what they said. They told Basil, throw that out. It's ridiculous. And then Pierre Sarko said the
But
same.
that's what Einstein said.
Einstein said that?
Yes.
I didn't know that. I didn't know
Yeah.
his view on
What does make
Heisenberg.
it,
He was very
well,
comfortable
that's-
with it.
Was he?
Yeah, he had the, that's why there is this whole Einstein-Podolsky paradox.
God does not play dice with the
Yeah.
universe.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, what they did was they said, all quantum mechanics is a probability theory. It says, well, we can't image the electron going through this slit, so therefore we're going to make a probability chart of where it's probably going to be. And we'll base all our physics on that probability chart, which is, it's insane. And it's useful for macro scale, for that size only, but it blocks you from getting smaller, so.
Well, it's like Newtonian physics was a certain level.
Yeah, certain
Quantum
level.
is this level, and now we need super.
Now we need a
quantum.
super level. And they also talked about, they said there's a whole range of what they called high frequency particles, which they said our physicists don't even know about yet. And which you can just let your imagination run what that means. Yeah.
One thing I want to say, about 12 of us went to the first New Energy Movement conference in Portland about 12 years ago, and we heard the guy speak who was trained by Eugene Mallow. Eugene Mallow was the guy who published that Infinite
Yeah,
Energy.
Eugene Mallow,
and
he was from
Right.
New Hampshire.
He was killed
He
a
was
couple of
murdered,
months
yeah.
before
I
the
still haven't
conference.
get
Yeah.
all of it, yeah.
Right, but at the conference, his friend said that they have proved that all three laws of thermodynamics are not actually laws.
Yeah, I'm not up on thermodynamics. I don't know much about it.
But also, you heard about this guy, George Merkel? So
They-
George Merkel, he's of Hungarian origin, he lived in El Paso, and he is, because I personally visited him, because I was totally fascinated with his work. He started working in the area of healing, but he was microbiologist and nuclear physicist. And he told me that he was original inventor of cold fusion. He said they don't know really what they're doing. And then he showed me something of kind of how he was doing this biologic genetics in plants. And he said this race is not ready for any genetic kind of work because of ethics.
Yeah,
what
ethics. There's no
we do with
ethics.
that.
Right.
And then every conference he goes, CIA agents were around him. So he came up with this discovery, it's called Renaissance crystals. It's for cancer, whatever. And then he was going in the conference somewhere. And he was
It's
in
called
the
life
car.
crystals too. Yeah, we knew
Life
about,
crystals, that's
yeah,
right.
we knew about that in Eugene. We used to order cases of that thing.
Yeah,
It was a beverage that was in the sun. It was like put in these huge cylinders, and then they did some kind of nuclear twist on it. And my hair actually stopped turning gray coming out of the roots of my head. My hairdresser
He was
noticed
a
that.
genius. I mean,
He was
he
a
was
genius,
a poet,
yeah.
he was artist, he was researcher. He had his laboratory in El Paso. He was growing in a certain arid area, grapes or something for his particular dish. But what happened, he was driving to a conference in a car and he was killed. But how he was killed? Because I came to know through someone, he was in a car and he felt something wet where he was sitting and he knew it was poison. And he said, I don't know how that came, why he didn't save his life. He said, if I did that, then it killed my life or whatever.
Yeah.
So he let go the poison,
Wow.
killed him. Amazing man.
Yeah.
I have some of his tapes.
Pretty bad people working in the government.
You speaking of the government, what about alien contact with government officials? You know, you hear these statements from several past presidents about UFOs, and they're a little bit coy about what they're saying.
Except that Russian. You
Who's
hear all,
pretty direct. Yeah, right, the Russian president.
you hear all these different things. I mean, there's a movie, it's either out or coming out soon about Valiant Thor. Has anybody heard of that? He was supposedly a very advanced human. He looked like us, but he came from another planet and came right into the military in the Pentagon and announced himself and said he was he was willing to trade technology for if we would stop all our nuclear programs and disarm all our nuclear weapons. And this is at the time of Eisenhower. And there were many witnesses in the White House and in the Pentagon who talked to him, saw him. There's pictures of him. And apparently the story is Eisenhower refused and said, no, we won't do that. And he left.
What's his name again?
Valiant Thor. But, I don't know. Yeah.
Can you elaborate on the story you told us in the past year or so about this person that you knew at Harvard who was who met
Oh yeah,
an advisor at Harvard University who
she
claimed to be an alien, not
She graduated from Radcliffe, 66 or 67, something like that. And she went to graduate school in language. That was her major, and it was either Berkeley or Stanford. I can't remember which one. And she had an academic advisor in the language department who was advising on her studies. And one day he invited her over to tea at his house. She said, she told me the story personally. She said he was very nice. He was a very well-known professor. And they're sitting down at this table drinking tea, talking about this and that, and all of a sudden he said, oh, by the way, I'm not from this planet. I'm from the Pleiades. And he said, there are many of us here. Some of us are working in the Pentagon, some in other parts of the government, and we're trying to direct your government in a good, positive direction. And she said, oh, that's nice.
What do you drink?
She changed the subject because she didn't know what to say. And when she told it to me, which was probably around 1983 or 4, she said, at the time she thought he was, he'd gone off the deep end. But she said now, thinking back, she's changing her mind. At least when she told me, she's...
Well, they haven't been very successful.
No. Well, we don't know what they might have been trying.
Yeah, what they prevented already, yeah.
And they're so, right now it's...
Oh, but they let 9/11 go, right?
I don't think they let it go, I think they caused it.
Yeah.
Doesn't take, my major in college was structural engineering, and you don't have to look very deep to find out that this government story is totally baloney.
You think they caused it?
Yeah.
Who's they?
It's as an attempt of our spiritual development?
No, as an attempt to cause a war, give us a reason to invade the Middle East.
When you say they, you mean the darker forces of the government?
Yeah, I don't think it's like all the CIA or all the military. There's certain parts of it, and they may very well have done it without the other parts knowing it. And
And Bush and Cheney, were they?
I know Bush, I just don't feel he was really smart enough to do anything.
He was a pawn.
But Cheney definitely.
Yeah.
Cheney's a psychopath.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, he was the one that called down the Air Force to tell them not to do any
They had,
flybys.
you know how many
He shot his friend in the face because he thought it was a deer or something.
He's the
They
smart
had-
one.
they had, how many different fake drills going on in the Air Force that there was,
Yeah.
15 or something. And jets that normally would scramble in Washington DC were all the way out, like, western states, and it's just amazing.
As a structural engineer, if you view Building 7 as the smoking gun,
Building 7
Yeah.
was blown up with demolition.
it was clearly a planned, engineered building demolition.
We saw so many tapes in school showing demolition.
Yeah.
And it was a demolition.
Yeah.
Could not have fallen.
They didn't fake the planes though, man.
What?
They didn't fake the planes.
No, I don't think
They went into the buildings.
But, I think
We
they
got
were.
pilot,
What?
we got
A lot
pilot.
of people died.
Well, see, at the time of 2001, they had the technology to take over the control of an airplane remotely. All planes, I think, all 737s, 757s at that time had that capacity to be remotely taken over.
Transponders.
Yeah, whatever. And one of the companies that pioneered that technology was right near me, MITRE Corporation. And, so, no, it was all possible.
Have you ever seen yourself a UFO or?
Well, just the one at Mount Adams. I've seen a lot of strange things. I haven't seen one close up. I saw the Mount Adams one. In my lucid out-of-body experience, I've seen them close up. There was one that came right in my yard, and then they communicated with me, or tried to, and I got scared. And I felt this voice. There was like two beings talking to each other, and they said, "He's too afraid, we have to leave." And the ship was, have anybody seen the Gulf Breeze ships? Okay, they sort of, when they're hovering, they have a very faint light on the top and the bottom, and sort of like an orange band down the middle. And that's exactly what this looked like. When it was hovering, it was just this orange band, light. And then after they said, "We have to leave," all of a sudden it brightened up, became brilliant white light, and then
How is it you hear them in English?
thought that goes through
Yeah,
here, it has no words attached to it.
yeah.
Like if a pure thought comes in your mind, you can actually watch your mind attach words to the thought. The thought doesn't have words, and I don't know any other way to describe it than that. And sometimes, it'll attach some word, and sometimes you can watch your mind change words, say, "Oh no, I think this word's better," and then you'll come out with a sentence. So they can send the thought using their language, it gets transferred into thought, and then your mind transfers it back into language. And so a lot can be lost, a lot can be mistranslated.
So you're saying there's more telepathic capacity among those races?
Yeah, I think so.
There's more telepathic potential within human beings than any alien. Well, not maybe any, but the Greys. That's all they do because they can't talk.
I think psychic communication would be the future of us.
But you're making a worthy and interesting point that when they talk about telepathic communication, there are not words going back and forth. Yeah,
It's
thank
pure
you.
idea.
Yes.
That's what Jane Contra says, is we have to elevate ourselves to be telepathically.
Jane Contra's sitting right over there.
Jane Contra's sitting right over there.
That's good.
You can ask her.
What did I say? What did I say?
That we need to elevate our ability to communicate telepathically, to communicate with ETs. is what
Yeah, we
I
had,
call it.
with our John Mack group, we had several, meetings where we were really trying to communicate with ETs. We were really meditating and trying, and none of us were really successful, although we had some very obvious, where we all felt that there were beings in the room, we could all feel them, but that we couldn't communicate. So, the one thing I got, which was really interesting, and I think I have to end with this because I have to go, is I got this distinct message in my mind several times, and it said, if you want to communicate with us, you have to look at the space in between your words. We're right there.
Okay, is there anything that we can do all of ourselves to further this movement toward a connection? I mean, meditation, of course, is.
I think meditation is one thing. I mean, I remember one of the people in John Mack's group her name was Vicky. She's in one of his books under a different name, but she told me that for the people who she's had all the contact with, they're called blondes, right? And she says they're from the Aryan star system. And they told her that she should meditate. And they taught her meditation, which it just so happens is very much like one of the lessons that we do. And they told her to meditate twice a day, 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening. And every time they came to pick her up, the first thing they'd say to her was, "Have you been doing your meditation?" And she'd say, "No." They'd say, "You should be doing your meditation."
Which lesson?
Which lesson?
Sixth.
Sixth.
Just one question about microwaves in the environment, the 2 million plus for microwaves increase radio
Right.
frequency, and what's it doing to the birds, the bees? And
What's it doing to us? Like, Basil asked them, why can't we detect any of your transmissions, your communications? They said, well, we don't use electromagnetic radiation anymore. They said, because we found it adversely affects the brain. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the polar shift?
Okay, well, the first time I heard about the polar shift was from Pierre Sorka, who wrote an article named "The Poles Are Shifting."
We'll shift their respective
The
positions.
shift of
Poles,
the
yeah, poles shift their respective position. Where he said this periodically happens and that will be happening soon, I think.
And it's magnetic and also,
Well, I can't remember exactly what Pierre Sorka said because we also got more information from.
Yeah, but I've gone back and checked that it's both the rotational axis, which is more rare.
Yeah,
and,
more rare.
And the magnetic.
Magnetic's more common.
Yeah, every
And
700,000
I think,
years
if
or
you
something.
correct me, I think he said the magnetic was going to happen first and then the geographic.
Yeah.
And he said the geographic, there would be a slight pole shift followed in 2 years by the more significant one.
2 years or 2 days?
2 years.
2 years.
And he also, when I was in India, he was telling, he told this monk, Mukti Gyananda, he said that the pole shift was going to happen in less than a day. He said the severity had not yet been determined because a lot of it depends on the changes we do in our society. He said, but it was inevitable, and he said many of our brothers and sisters from other planets were coming to help us if it's severe. So they reflected exactly what was said the days of his ETs. They said the same thing.
so what causes a,
Reaction.
rotational polar
Big
shift?
earthquake.
He said, he said when after the pole shift, scientists will try and find a reason for it to have happened, and they won't be able to. He said because the majority of the cause is psychic. And I think I was along the lines of what I was telling you when there's oppression of human growth. It's like a psychic buildup of energy, and it's that psychic explosion that causes these things.
I can put some of this on the disclosure list
okay.
of people who are
That'd be good.
interested. I know it's a big subject in your time, I'm sure.
But
But he did hone down the time to around 2020.
2024.
Yeah, in that range. Yeah.
Yeah, the magnetic fields are,
Are screwing up.
well,
royally, yeah.
they're moving quickly, but they're chaotic.
Chaotic.
So anything that's chaotic can be flipped.
Yeah.
But on the other hand,
Rudy Shield at Harvard told me that these huge, there's a very big magnetic anomalies forming off of North Korea and off of Argentina, which is exactly where Terasarko said the poles were going to shift to.
yeah.
But to my mind, what you're saying is, it's just, the connection is that we have the ability to alter or to change the space, but we have to do it together.
We have to do it together, we have to do it soon. And
He said this one is too
he says too late to stop, but we can affect the severity.